I have been asked to speak about my 47 years of experience in 15 minutes. I think it is too much of an ask. Just in time or whatever Japanese technique you use, I won't be able to complete it. So I have decided to dwell upon the macro level of manufacturing rather than getting into micro levels, where I think most of you speakers and various panelists are going to talk about. And let me really dwell on the philosophy and the relevance of advancement in technology as far as manufacturing is concerned. Because the micro level manufacturing inputs are going to come out of various panel discussions, and the panelists who are going to come here. By virtue of my experience in the industry for more than 47 years, I have experienced almost all the generations of industrial revolution, you can say, or industrial advancement as far as manufacturing is concerned. I've seen the power looms, I have seen the hand-operated reels, I've seen the milling machines in a very, you can say, vintage format. Thereafter, I've seen the PLC-based running machines. Thereafter, I've seen the CNC machines. Thereafter, I've seen the cyber-physical part of it also, which we call it as Industry 4.0. And while people are still digesting Industry 4.0, I've already begun talking about Industry 5.0 with my colleague partner. Now, virtually people are really thinking what exactly we are going towards when we are trying to talk about Industry 5.0. But certainly, I will throw some light on that. But prior to that, I would like to get into some kind of a preamble on what exactly happened in the past, those 40, 50 years, why we have shifted from an inward-looking society as far as manufacturing or marketplaces or the demand to an outward-looking society where we are really today talking about global platform or global marketplace where we would like to approach. Rather than we approaching, people are looking at us as the global manufacturing hub. In my recent global conference in Vietnam last year, I spoke on this particular topic about China Plus One strategy, manufacturing prowess as far as India is concerned, and why people should be looking at India as a manufacturing hub. And let me tell you, we got tremendous response. And everyone during post-conference was discussing with us what is happening in India. And that is where I had to tell them that how we have approached from Industry 1.0 to Industry 4.0 and how we are going to go into Industry 5.0. My real experience as far as manufacturing is concerned started in 1989-90 when I was heading a business unit in Kirloskar Oil Engines, manufacturing 400 to 8,000 horsepower diesel engines, where the basic purpose of I going there as a SBU head was to improve the productivity, the inventory controls, or the inventory turns, what we used to call it in management jargon, that we were operating at a certain number and we had to double it to just lower down the stocking policy or reduce the number, the stores or the value of the inventory that was going on. So many things were happening there. I was given a challenge that we can't produce more than 7 engines in a month, on a normal working month. And let me tell you, in a year's time, I produced 13 engines out of that particular shop in a month of Diwali, where we had 5 extra holidays. So nothing is impossible when you really put your mind through a particular process or through a method of operation or through technology. Of course, when I'm talking about 89, 90, all these technologies were absent. I had only 2 CNCs. One was Moriseki for machining the cylinder heads and another was Mazek. The rest all were conventional machine tools based on which I used to manufacture those 400 horsepower engines. And ultimately we went up to 8,000 horsepower where I did my own training for assembly of that 6,400 horsepower engine in south of France. Staying there for 2.5 months, picked up all the components myself and assembled that entire engine, which we ultimately sold it to Coast Guards and Navy. There are a couple of propulsion plants which we designed for the Indian Navy, Indian Coast Guard, ONGC, and all the defense sectors. Of course, I've worked in all the defense sectors as far as applications are concerned, right from Army, giving an engine for tanks, Air Force, managing all the radar and communication offices where we used to supply power stations, and Coast Guard, Navy. Now, in these experiences which I've had as a business unit head, I could increase the inventory turns, thereby reducing the inventory cost. I could increase the productivity, as I said, from 7 to 13 engines. I changed the entire layout because anything under the crane is a prime property. Nothing should be kept which is a dead stock there. And that was the first principle which I introduced in my manufacturing setup. Everything which was not operational or not mobile, I removed it from that. So wherever the crane was operating, only the material which continuously moves has to be kept there. That was the basic common principle which I had applied there. I motivated workers. I built up teams. I sat with them, had dinners, lunches with them as a business unit head, which they were not used to. They were producing an engine of 8,000 horsepower, which was costing at that time 2.5 crores. I'm talking about 1983, 1984 at that time. And those people were working two shifts, three shifts. And at that time, they used to eat that vada pav in Kadki, going out in the night at 10:30, 11 o'clock. And when I saw that kind of a flight, I said, this is not that. When we are selling an engine of 2.5 crores, how can they eat only vada pav and create that property for us? I used to call dinner for them from Blue Diamond Hotel. A car was parked, a driver was parked. The dinner used to be called from Blue Diamond for all the workers who were there. Because there were workers who were sleeping there for 2 nights, 3 nights, because we were to deliver the engines which were going on warships. And when the application is so critical, when the people who are contributing are so critical, how can I leave them when I'm eating at my place? They should be having dinner from Blue Diamond, because at that time Blue Diamond was controlled by us. It was a Kirloskar outfit where we had a majority shareholder. So this was something which was very, very important in motivating. Now in this, there is nothing called Industry 4 or Industry 5 or generation of this thing. These are very, very common sense things with which I increase the productivity to almost 60%. Now having said that, I had only two avenues where, as I said, that I have only two CNC machines. In those two CNC machines, whatever productivity I had to increase, we just added that. But then, realizing the potential they put me in the entire Kirloskar manufacturing plant. And in that, Mr. Kirloskar said that you are basically a marketing man. How come you contribute so much in manufacturing? I said, well, I have learned many things because normally we used to push in manufacturing. I told them that I've learned pulling in manufacturing, and I think there is a famous book called Goal. I was trained by one of the mentors of Goldat, who's the author of that particular book. If somebody has not read it in manufacturing, they should be reading that. Because manufacturing is nothing but pulling. It is not pushing. If you push it, inventory piles up. If you pull it, it's like a chain. You know, if you have a 10 linkages chain, you push it, the chain won't go further. You pull it, the chain comes further. So you have to change your end. Rather than pushing from the back, you pull it from the front. Then the entire flow takes place. So that is a simple principle of manufacturing which I learned from that particular book. And another book which I read was Toyota Manufacturing. Because we had a collaboration with Toyota. Toyota Kirloskar was a collaboration. So we were exposed to all the Japanese techniques of TQR, Kaizen, Toyota manufacturing system, and global manufacturing excellence. There is another book which I read, and based on which I applied certain common senses for improvement of productivity. And that's how I received that kind of a result. So why I'm telling you all this is basically because ultimately we have to go for productivity, or we have to go for lower cost, or we have to increase the motivational forces amongst the workers, or we have to build a team, or we have to create an ecosystem which runs by itself. And this is where the basic crux is there. Of course, all the tools and gadgets, I'm going to come to that ultimately. But then during this tenure, I realized that when we were working like this, there were countries in the Far East, Japan, Korea, Thailand, Taiwan, and China. In the European continent, we had Poland, Czechoslovakia, in European Union. At that time, it was only Europe, it was Italy and Germany. And on the American continent, it was Mexico and Brazil. Now, why I'm taking these particular names? Because I have studied them in details. I have visited them, most of these countries, to look at their manufacturing. Those countries were far ahead. I used to go there for sourcing of components. Those countries were far ahead. I'll give you a simple example of a crankshaft manufacturing company in Germany. I saw that in the second shift, in the evening while going, a crankshaft machining center was there. They used to put all the pallets down there. I said, why these forgings are lying here? He says, because these forgings will go on that machine, and the other side, in the morning, you will get the finished crankshaft. I said, what happens to quality? He says that it is checked in mind. And what happens to the rejection? It gets thrown out and kept it in some other bin. So the systems were there then when I used to visit in late 80s and early 90s. And those did not get qualified as Industry 4.0 or Industry 3.0 or whatever it is. But these kind of things I have seen. I have seen a bolt manufacturing company in Korea which manufactured only bolts. I have seen a nut manufacturing company which manufactures only nuts. And you will not believe an AK-47 may be firing 100 bullets, they fire more than 100 nuts. What somebody was doing was only feeding the wire rods. And I still have that visual in front of me. I was standing on the top and the shop floor was like that. There were several such machines there and the wire rods were loaded and it was just getting like bullets. The nuts were coming out, the bolts were coming out. I've seen the Luoil filter factories in Taiwan. I've seen seal factories in China. I've seen CNC machining facilities in China where thousands of CNC machines are kept. Their MOQ per day is 1 million pieces. If you talk about 1 million pieces, come to us, otherwise we won't. I went there with a lot of tight they were like, I need 100,000 pieces per month. I said, okay, we'll do it in 2 shifts. That's all. I said, I need per month. He said, no, I'll give you in 1 day. That is the scale they were talking. That really shook me very, very much. And that is when I realized that why we are so much satisfied as far as business is concerned, as far as manufacturing is concerned in India. 2014, when Make in India came in, where everyone started discussing why we should not do something here. We may sell it anywhere, but then make it in India. Because at that time, GDP had only 50% as a contribution from manufacturing. And the government wanted manufacturing to go up because in manufacturing, 55% of that is supported by MSMEs. Now, MSME is the bread and butter as far as employment is concerned, because it carries a lot of load as far as employment is concerned. And of course, OEMs are there to support MSMEs. Now, MSMEs have to contribute more in that. And if MSMEs have to contribute more in that, the manufacturing has to come back to India rather than going elsewhere. And geopolitical situation, if you really look at it, what happened between 2014 and till now, in the last 10 years, it has changed so drastically. Americans, they shift their manufacturing outside. Europeans have started shifting their manufacturing outside. It has started coming towards east or south. And most of the manufacturing was being taken care of by the countries which I said. Japan was virtually controlling or monopolizing everything in Thailand. I went to Thailand manufacturers because they were the best. They said that we don't do any work other than Japanese. So virtually 4 days of I going around everywhere with appointments was a waste. Nobody took my orders. So we had to resort to Taiwan because China we didn't want to go because quality, consistency, and all those things were problematic. So the countries which were left out was China, Thailand, Korea, and Japan. Japan we couldn't go because price-wise they were never competitive. They could not meet their own demands. So Korea was one. Thailand was given to Japan. So Taiwan was one and China was one. So I chose Taiwan. And from Taiwan, we built up the entire economy. And it really started working very well. But then those things had to come down to India. In Make in India situation, where more than these government contracts are there, we have to have indigenous content of more than 51%. And that is where things started working. That we started building up, and the target was set to reach 25% of the GDP as far as manufacturing was concerned. And this 25% is a very, very big thing. And that is how we took up the manufacturing. And to add to that, COVID came in. Prior to COVID, I was preaching about Industry 4.0, that people should migrate to Industry 4.0 because global space is opening up. When we talk about global space, it's a marketplace. The scaling up has to be done. The product has to be more reliable. It has to be consistent. It has to be delivered on time. And unless and until you modernize your process, you modernize your manufacturing, nothing is going to move like that. And that is where people were very reluctant to understand that. But post-COVID, what happens? People, the migrated workers disappeared, production suffered. If they had migrated to Industry 4.0, at least they would have salvaged some portion of production. And which is what COVID changed the situation. And we really started working on Industry 4.0. Several requests came in for Industry 4.0. And people realized the importance because scalability was important, productivity was important, their quality was important, delivery was important, cost was important. Without these things, you could not attack international space. And by that time, people had, because of the geopolitical situation, people had almost made up their minds that they will route all the materials either to Vietnam or to India. And of course, India has been there a player for a long time. So a lot of requirements came back to India. And we started working on our manufacturing process and we improved it further. And today now, when we have achieved that Industry 4.0, more or less we have understood, we thought that we should be introducing Industry 5.0 because it is us who have really invented that manufacturing system. So a tool which has been invented by humans, that tool cannot replace humans. That is the point which we are trying to build up in Industry 5.0 because human mind is creative, intuitive, and innovative. These three things in any digital format or in any automated format cannot come about because we take instant decisions based on the exigencies of the contingencies. That is where Industry 5.0 comes in. I've been working on AMRs to take care of the supply chain, warehousing, as well as assembly line movement of goods. I'm personally trying to sell it through a Singapore-based company. And we are also working with another company where we will robotize the entire loading and unloading of the machine tools, CNC machine tools. So by which we will work out. And the third aspect of the robotic automation, which we are working on, is just acquiring all the data from the machines and then deriving the total cycle efficiency as far as these machine tools are concerned. So Industry 4.0, 5.0, and then robotic automation superimposed on that. If we really work it out, then we will really stand up in the international markets as far as competition is concerned. And then we would be able to, you can say, access the demand from across the globe and people will appreciate what India is going to do. Yes, Make in India and Atmanirbhar has helped us the policy-wise and it will certainly work in our way. We have, while doing this MSME improvements, we have also spent a lot of time in restructuring MSMEs as far as their assets are concerned, as far as their finances are concerned. So today, in my own capacity, I have been helping all the MSMEs, all the startups in investment, funding, mergers, acquisition, joint ventures, and what have you. We are running several projects on this front, and then basic intention, as I said, I get run by only two agenda points. One is problem solving, and second is value addition. That please do not restructure your assets. When I say restructure your asset, don't try to sell it off. Don't try to hive it off. If you are facing problem of finances, come to me, I'll solve it. And thereafter, there have been several people who have been approaching me. They want this working capital, they want this money for development, they want this money for go-to-markets. I have been helping them on growth strategies, on everything. So, if all of us come together and put through these concepts together, I think nobody can stop us becoming India as a manufacturing country. Thank you very much.